Captain Hyunwoo pulled his merchant ship closer to Kalari Prime Station. The massive trading hub looked like a metal city floating in space. Ships from dozens of different worlds were docked at its many ports. Some ships were sleek and silver. Others were rough and covered in strange patterns. All of them carried traders from across the galaxy. "Docking complete, Captain," said So Young from her seat at the navigation controls. She was a small woman with quick hands and sharp eyes. "Port 7 Alpha, just like they told us." "Good work," Hyunwoo replied. He stood up and stretched. The journey from Earth had taken 3 weeks even with their new jump drive. Daeho shut down the engines. "Jin-A, get our trading papers ready." Daeho wiped grease from his hands. The big engineer always looked like he had just crawled out of the ship's engine room. Most of the time he had. "Engines are cool, Captain. She's ready for whatever repairs we might need." Jin-A looked up from her datapad. She was their best trader, able to spot a good deal from across a crowded marketplace. "Papers are ready. I've also got the list of what we're buying and selling. Should be a good trip if the prices hold." The 4 humans gathered their bags and walked toward the airlock. They had worked together for 2 years now, ever since the Galactic Trade Commission had started letting human ships work the outer routes. It was good money and they enjoyed seeing new worlds. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Cool, clean air flowed in from the station. Hyunwoo stepped out first, followed by his crew. The docking bay was huge, with high metal walls and bright lights. Dozens of other traders were moving around, carrying boxes and checking their ships. "First time here," So Young said quietly. "Big place." They walked toward the security checkpoint. This was always the most stressful part of visiting a new station. Every world had different rules, and breaking them could mean jail time or worse. Long line of traders waited to pass through security. Most of them were aliens. Hyunwoo could see the tall, gray Vorthak with their 4 arms. Their plasma claws glowed softly blue. Near them stood a group of Chitauri, insect-like beings with hard shells and multiple eyes. They carried bioweapons that looked like living plants. The security station was run by Korthians. The 4-eyed aliens were known for being fair but strict. They checked every trader carefully before letting them into the main station. Hyunwoo watched as the aliens ahead of them were searched. The Vorthak had to remove their plasma claws and put them in special containers. The Chitauri gave up their biospitters. A group of crystalline Nexari had to surrender weapons that looked like sharp glass. "Weapons check," called out one of the Korthian guards. "All weapons must be stored during your stay, no exceptions." The line moved slowly. Each alien was carefully scanned and searched. Hyunwoo noticed that some of them looked unhappy about giving up their weapons. One Vorthak warrior kept looking back at his plasma claws as they were carried away. Finally, it was their turn. The Korthian guard looked at them with all 4 eyes. His skin was a deep purple color, and he wore the blue uniform of station security. "Species?" the guard asked. "Human," Hyunwoo replied. The guard looked at his data screen. "Planet of origin?" "Earth." "Purpose of visit?" "Trade. We have permits from the Galactic Commerce Board." The guard looked them up and down. "Any weapons to declare?" "No," Hyunwoo said. "We don't carry any." The guard waved them through without scanning them. "Welcome to Kalari Prime. Follow the blue line to the market district." Hyunwoo blinked, in surprise. They had expected to be searched like everyone else, but the 4 humans walked through security without anyone checking their bags or scanning them for hidden weapons. Behind them, a young Zephyrian trader had been watching. Her name was Velthera, and she was new to inter-system trading. The bird-like alien had colorful feathers and large, curious eyes. She had never seen humans before. "Excuse me?" Velthera called out in broken galactic standard. Her translator device made her voice sound metallic. "Human captain, may I ask question?" Hyunwoo stopped and turned around. "Of course. What can I help you with?" Velthara pointed back at the security checkpoint. "Why do your people carry no weapons? And why do guards let you pass without checking? All other species must give up weapons, but not humans. Why?" The human crew exchanged glances. It was not the first time someone had asked this question, but it was always hard to answer. It's complicated, Hyun-woo said carefully. The rules are different for humans. But why? Velthara pressed. Your species looks soft, no claws, no natural weapons. How do you protect yourselves in dangerous galaxy? Before Hyun-woo could answer, a deep voice spoke from behind them. Young one, some questions have answers that take time to understand. They turned to see Station Administrator Kixtal approaching. The old Korthian was well known throughout the outer systems. He had been running Kalari Prime for over 20 years. His purple skin was marked with the scars of age, and his 4 eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen many things. Administrator, Hyun-woo said with respect. We didn't expect to meet you so soon. Kixtal nodded. Captain Hyun-woo, of the Sejong's Dream. Your reputation precedes you. I trust your journey was safe? Yes, sir. Thank you for asking. The old Korthian looked at Velthara. Young Zephyrian, you ask why humans need no weapons. It is a good question, but the answer is not simple. Can you explain? Velthara asked. Kixtal was quiet for a moment. He watched as more traders passed, through security, all of them surrendering their weapons. There are rules written in law, he said finally, and there are rules written in blood. The rule about humans, that one was written in both. What does that mean? Velthara's translator made her confusion clear. It means, Kixtal said slowly, that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that looks the most harmless. Humans learned long ago that the deadliest weapon is not the one you carry in your hand. Hyun-woo shifted uncomfortably. We should get to the market. Our trading window opens in an hour. Of course, Kixtal said. But remember, Captain, the young one asks honest questions. Perhaps someday you will feel comfortable giving honest answers. The administrator walked away, leaving the humans and Velthara standing in the busy corridor. Alien traders moved around them, carrying strange goods and speaking in dozens of different languages. I still don't understand, Velthara said. So Young stepped forward. Maybe understanding comes with time. For now, just know that humans have learned different ways to solve problems. Without weapons? Especially without weapons, Jin-A added. Quietly, the humans began walking toward the market district. Velthara watched them go, her mind full of questions. She noticed something strange as the humans moved through the crowded corridors. Other aliens stepped aside for them. Not in fear exactly, but with a kind of careful respect. It was as if every alien on the station knew something about humans that she did not understand. Something important. Something that made carrying weapons unnecessary. Velthara decided to follow them from a distance. Perhaps watching humans trade would help her understand the mystery. She had come to Kalari Prime to learn about galactic commerce. Instead, she had found a puzzle that might be much more interesting than any business deal. The answer to her question was somewhere on this station. She was determined to find it. 3 months before Captain Hyun-woo arrived at Kalari Prime, the biggest trade meeting in the galaxy took place on Helios VII. The planet was chosen because it sat at the center of several major trade routes. Ships from hundreds of worlds came to the Grand Exchange, bringing their best traders and most valuable goods. The meeting happened once every 5 years. It was a chance for different species to make deals that would affect the entire galaxy. New trade agreements were signed. Old disputes were settled. Prices for rare materials were set for years to come. Minister Ki-young led the human delegation. He was a calm man with gray hair and steady eyes. He had spent his whole career building relationships between Earth and other worlds. With him came 3 specialists, Jun-ho the economist, Yu-jin the cultural expert, and Won-sik the security advisor. The humans arrived on Helios 7th in a simple transport ship. They brought no guards, no weapons, and no fancy equipment. Other species arrived with full military escorts and enough firepower to level a small city. Interesting approach, commented War Chief Grathax of the hegemony of Talar. The massive, reptilian warrior stood 3 meters tall and was covered in natural armor. His teeth were like knives and his claws could cut through steel. How does a species survive without fangs or claws? Minister Ki-young smiled politely. We've found other ways to handle problems, War Chief. You must be prey animals. Grathax laughed. His warriors joined in the cruel sound. Perhaps we should test how well you run when chased. Perhaps, said Ambassador Nari quietly, you should focus on the trade negotiations instead. The human delegation ignored the insults and moved on. They had heard worse things from other species. Words could not hurt them, and they had work to do. The grand exchange took place in a huge building made of glass and metal. Inside, thousands of traders from different worlds set up booths and meeting rooms. The air was filled with the sounds of dozens of languages and the smell of exotic foods from across the galaxy. The humans set up their simple booth in a corner. They brought samples of Earth's products, rare minerals, unique foods, and artwork. Nothing fancy, but all of good quality. Junho spent his time studying the galactic economy. He watched how prices changed and tried to predict future trends. His reports helped Earth's government make smart decisions about what to buy and sell. Yujin moved through the crowds talking to traders from different species. She learned about their cultures and customs. This information helped humans avoid mistakes that could damage relationships. One Sikh stayed in the background, watching everything. His job was to keep the delegation safe, even though they carried no weapons. He studied the layout of the building and noted where the exits were located. Minister Ki-young spent most of his time in meetings with other government representatives. They discussed new trade routes and settled old arguments. The work was slow and often boring, but it was important. For 2 days, everything went smoothly. Deals were made, contracts were signed, and relationships were built. The humans made several good agreements that would benefit Earth for years to come. Then, on the 3rd day, everything changed. The trouble started during the morning session. A representative from the Vorthan Empire accused the Chitauri swarm of stealing industrial secrets. The insect-like Chitauri denied the charges, clicking angrily in their native language. The swarm took our quantum drive designs, shouted General Vexthor of the Vorthans. We have proof. Queen Speaker Zixra of the Chitauri rose on her 6 legs. The Empire lies. We develop our own technology. Lies. Vexthor slammed his fist on the table. Return what you stole or face the consequences. Minister Ki-young tried to step in. Perhaps we could examine the evidence calmly. This is not human business, Grathax roared. Stay out of affairs that don't concern you. But the damage was already done. The accusation had awakened old hatreds between the two species. The Vorthans and Chitauri had fought wars in the past, and those wounds had never fully healed. Within an hour, other species began choosing sides. The Nexari crystalline beings supported the Vorthans, claiming the Chitauri had stolen from them. 2. The Zephyrians backed the Chitauri, saying the Empire was trying to control all technology. Soon, 17 different species were involved in the growing argument. Ancient enemies remembered old grudges. Allies turned against each other over trade disputes. The careful diplomacy of the Grand Exchange fell apart. We should leave, Wonsik told Minister Ki-young quietly. This is getting dangerous. Not yet, the minister replied. We might be able to help solve this. But the situation was spinning out of control. Species representatives started shouting at each other in dozens of languages. Translator devices overloaded, trying to keep up with all the anger and threats. Then someone drew a weapon. Nobody was sure who did it first. Maybe it was a Vorthan officer reaching for his plasma rifle. Maybe it was a Chitauri warrior raising her biospitter. It didn't matter. Once one weapon appeared, they all did. The great hall of the Grand Exchange exploded into chaos. Plasma bolts flew through the air. Bioweapons released clouds of toxic gas. Crystal shards shattered against metal walls. The beautiful building became a war zone. Get to the medical bay, Yujin shouted over the noise. People are hurt. The human delegation ran through the battle, trying to help wounded traders reach safety. They had no weapons to fight with, so they focused on saving lives instead. Junho was helping an injured Nexari when a stray plasma bolt caught him in the chest. The economist fell to the ground. his body smoking from the energy blast. Yujin reached him first.
Junho, stay with us.
The wounded man looked up at her with fading eyes.
Find another way,
he whispered. Then he was gone. Yujin knelt beside her dead colleague as the battle raged around her. Tears ran down her face. Junho had been a good man, dedicated to building peace between worlds through trade. He had never hurt anyone in his life. Now, he was dead because other species could not control their anger. Minister Ki Young found her there a few minutes later. "We have to go. The building isn't safe." "They killed him," Yujin said quietly. "They killed Junho for trying to help." One Sick appeared beside them, his face hard with controlled rage. "Sir, we need to leave now. Security forces are moving in." The minister looked down at Junho's body. Something changed in his expression. The diplomatic smile he had worn for 20 years disappeared. His eyes became cold and calculating. "One Sick," he said very quietly. "Begin Protocol 7. 1-6. Expression grew sharp. "Sir, are you certain? Once we cross that line?" "They crossed it first when they killed Junho. Protocol 7 was something most humans hoped would never be used. It was an emergency plan created by Earth's government for situations exactly like this. When diplomacy failed, and humans were threatened, Protocol 7 gave them permission to use their most dangerous weapon, their minds." Yujin looked up at the minister. "What do you want me to do?" "What you do best," Ki Young replied. "Learn about these species, all of them. I want to know their weaknesses, their fears, and their pressure points. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." One Sick, I need tactical analysis. Exits, choke points, key personnel, map everything." "Already working on it," the security advisor replied. Minister Ki Young looked around at the chaos surrounding them. 17 species were tearing apart the most important trade meeting in the galaxy. They had killed an innocent human who was only trying to help. That had been their mistake. "Nari," he called to the ambassador who was helping evacuate civilians. "Start making contacts. I want to talk to janitors, food vendors, maintenance workers, anyone who sees and hears things." "What are you planning?" Nari asked. Minister Ki Young's smile returned, but it was different now. Colder, more dangerous. "We're going to end this war," he said simply. "All of it." The humans had tried diplomacy. They had tried to help. They had tried to be peaceful, but the galaxy had chosen violence instead. Now they would learn why humans were the only species that had survived their own world's tendency toward self-destruction. The lesson was about to begin. The death of Junho changed everything for the human delegation. For the first time in decades, humans at a galactic trade meeting dropped their diplomatic masks and showed what lay beneath. Minister Ki Young stood over his colleague's body for a long moment. Around them, the battle continued to rage. Plasma bolts lit up the air like deadly fireworks. The beautiful glass walls of the Grand Exchange were cracked and smoking. "Sir," One Sick said urgently, "we need to move. This area isn't secure." The minister nodded slowly. "Get his body to safety. Junho deserves better than to be left in this chaos." As they moved toward a safer area of the building, Ki Young's mind was already working. Humans had not survived on Earth by being the strongest or fastest species. They had survived by being the smartest, by learning to turn any situation to their advantage. The other species in the galaxy saw humans as weak because they carried no natural weapons, no claws, no fangs, no armor plating. What they didn't understand was that humans had learned to make weapons from everything else. "Nari," the minister called to the ambassador. "I need you to start talking to the support staff. Janitors, cooks, maintenance workers, people who move around the building and see things." Nari looked confused. "What kind of information do you want?" "Everything. Who's meeting with who? Which groups are running low on supplies, where the leaders sleep, what they're afraid of. Any detail, no matter how small." The ambassador understood. Intelligence gathering. The most important kind. The kind that wins wars without firing a shot. While Nari began her work, Minister Ki Young turned to Yu Jin. The cultural expert was still shaken by Junho's death, but her mind was sharp and focused. I need psychological profiles on every species involved in this fight, he told her. What makes them angry? What makes them afraid? How do they make decisions? Who do they listen to? Yu Jin wiped away her tears and nodded. I can do that. Most of the information is in my files already. I just need to analyze it differently. Good. I want tactical analysis. Not for fighting, but for controlling movement. Where do these species feel safe? Where do they feel trapped? How can we influence their actions without them knowing it? 1-6's eyes were cold as winter. I understand, sir. We're not going to fight them. We're going to manipulate them. Exactly. The humans found a quiet corner of the building that had been abandoned during the fighting. It was a small office that belonged to one of the maintenance crews. Perfect for their needs. Nari returned first with her report. I've talked to 12 different support staff members. The information is interesting. She spread out a datapad with her notes. The Vorthon Empire delegation is running low on their special food supplements. Without them, their warriors become weak and confused. The Chitauri Queen Speaker hasn't slept in 36 hours because she's worried about the accusations. The Nexari are afraid their trade routes will be cut off if this fighting continues. Minister Ki Young studied the information carefully. What about the others? The hegemony of Talar brought extra weapons, but they're stored in a warehouse on the other side of the city. If something happened to their transport, they'd be stuck with just what they're carrying. The Zephyrians are worried about their young traders getting hurt. They're already talking about leaving early. Excellent work. Yu Jin, what do you have? The cultural expert pulled up her own files. I've been analyzing the psychological patterns. The Vorthons value honor above everything else. If their honor is questioned, they become reckless. The Chitauri make decisions as a group, but they panic if they can't communicate with their hive mind. She continued reading from her notes. The Nexari hate loud noises because it interferes with their crystal-based senses. The Talar respond to challenges by becoming more aggressive, but they respect strength. The Zephyrians will do anything to protect their young. Wansik added his own observations. I've mapped the building layout. There are 3 main exits, but 17 different maintenance shafts and service tunnels. The environmental controls are centralized in the basement. The communication array is on the roof, but there's a backup system in the east wing. Minister Ki Young absorbed all the information. His diplomatic training had taught him to see connections that others missed. Now he began to see how all these pieces could fit together. Here's what we're going to do, he said quietly. We're going to end this war in 12 hours, and we're going to do it without anyone knowing we were involved. The humans worked through the night while the battle raged in other parts of the building. Their plan was complex but simple in its genius. Instead of trying to stop the fighting directly, they would make each species stop themselves. Yu Jin started with the Vorthon Empire. She knew their culture valued honor and family loyalty above all else. She also knew that the Emperor's son, Prince Kexthar, was part of the delegation. Using the maintenance tunnels, she made her way to the Vorthon quarters. She waited until she could speak privately with a young Vorthon warrior who was guarding the area. I'm worried about the prince, she told him in perfect Vorthon language. I overheard some of the older advisors talking. They said if the prince fails here, he'll never be worthy to inherit the throne. The young warrior's eyes widened. In Vorthon culture, questioning a heir's worthiness was a deadly insult. What did they say exactly? Yu Jin pretended to look nervous. I shouldn't repeat it. But they were laughing about how the prince's father would have to choose a new heir, someone stronger. Within an hour, Prince Kexthar was confronting his father's advisors, accusing them of betrayal. The Vorthon delegation fell into internal fighting, too busy with their own problems to attack anyone else. Meanwhile, Nari was working on the Chitauri. She had learned that the Queen Speaker's communication link to the hive mind was being disrupted by all the electromagnetic interference from the weapons fire. Nari spread a rumor among the support staff that the hegemony of Talar had developed a new bioweapon, one that specifically targeted insect-like species by attacking their nervous systems. When the rumor reached the Chitauri delegation, they immediately assumed that the communication problems were the first sign of a bioweapon attack. Within 2 hours, they were evacuating back to their ships to protect the hive mind. Wansik handled the Nexari with elegant simplicity. He accessed the building's fire suppression system and triggered it in the area where the crystalline beings were fighting. The foam wasn't dangerous, but it completely clogged their breathing filters and made their crystal-based senses useless. The Nexari retreated to clean themselves and check their equipment, assuming they had been targeted by some kind of chemical weapon. Minister Ki Young dealt with the remaining species through pure psychology and economics. He started rumors about market crashes, questioned the loyalty of key advisors, and played on each species' deepest fears. The Talar received anonymous messages suggesting that their enemies had discovered their weapon storage location. They immediately sent half their warriors to guard the warehouse, weakening their forces in the main battle. The Zephyrians got word that several of their young traders had been injured in the crossfire. Even though it wasn't true, they immediately began evacuating all their non-essential personnel. But the most devastating move came when Minister Ki Young discovered the truth behind the original accusation. The industrial espionage charge that had started the whole conflict was based on forged documents. He didn't just prove the documents were fake. He traced them back to their source and discovered something shocking. The forgeries had been created by a conspiracy involving 12 different species, all working together to manipulate the galactic market. By dawn, the 17-species war had collapsed completely. Some groups were fighting among themselves. Others had retreated to protect against imaginary threats. Several delegations had simply left the planet entirely. The building was quiet for the first time in 18 hours. Minister Ki Young stood in the main hall looking at the damage. Broken glass covered the floor. Scorch marks decorated the walls. But the structure was intact, and most importantly, no one else had died. "Sir," Wansik said quietly, "it's over. All hostile forces have been neutralized or withdrawn." "What about casualties?" Eugen asked. "Surprisingly light," Nari reported. "Mostly minor injuries from the initial fighting. Once the group started turning on themselves or retreating, the violence dropped significantly." Minister Ki Young nodded. "And they have no idea we were involved?" "None," Wansik confirmed. "As far as they know, their problems were caused by internal conflicts, equipment failures, and bad intelligence. We're just the harmless humans who were caught in the middle." The minister looked down at his hands. They were steady, showing no sign of what they had accomplished. In 12 hours, 4 humans had ended a 17-species war using nothing but words, rumors, and an understanding of alien psychology. Not a single shot fired, not a single weapon drawn, not even a raised voice. "Pack up," Minister Ki Young said, quietly. "It's time to go home." As they prepared to leave Helios 7th, none of the humans spoke about what they had done. They had saved thousands of lives and prevented a trade war that could have affected the entire galaxy. But they had also demonstrated something that would change humanity's relationship with every other species in the galaxy forever. News of what happened at Helios 7 spread across the galaxy like wildfire, but not in the way anyone expected. The official reports talked about equipment failures, internal conflicts, and communication breakdowns. 17 species had stopped fighting, but nobody could explain exactly why. Only a few beings suspected the truth. Station Administrator Kixtal was one of them. "Impossible," muttered General Vexthor of the Vorthan Empire during a private meeting 3 days after the incident. "Our intelligence network is the best in the galaxy. How could we miss signs of betrayal among our own advisors?" Kixtal had been reviewing security footage from the Grand Exchange. His 4 eyes studied the data with the patience of someone who had spent decades learning to see patterns others missed. "General," he said carefully, "what if there was no betrayal among your advisors? Then how do you explain Prince Kexthar's accusations? The evidence was clear." "Was it?" Kixtal brought up footage from the maintenance areas. "Look at this." The screen showed a young human woman talking to a Vorthan guard. The conversation looked innocent enough, but Kixtal had enhanced the audio and run it through analysis programs. "The human plants the idea," he explained. She doesn't make accusations. She doesn't provide evidence. She simply expresses worry and lets the Vorthan's own cultural paranoia do the rest. General Vexthor watched the footage again, his forearms tensing with anger. Are you saying the humans manipulated us? I'm saying the humans are far more dangerous than anyone realized. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Queen Speaker Zixra of the Chitauri was discovering that the bioweapon rumors had come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The Nexari High Council couldn't find any evidence of the chemical attack that had forced their retreat, but the most disturbing discovery came from the hegemony of Talar. War Chief Grathax stood in his command center, staring at a holographic display. His reptilian face showed confusion and growing anger. You're telling me the weapon storage threat was fake? His intelligence chief, a smaller but equally fierce Talar named Grexaval, nodded reluctantly. Sir, we've checked every source. The anonymous tip that sent half our warriors to guard the warehouse came from a communication node that doesn't exist. Explain. The message was routed through 17 different systems to hide its origin. But when we traced it back, the original source point was a maintenance terminal in the Grand Exchange building, a terminal that was supposedly offline for repairs. Grathax's claws scraped against the metal floor. The humans. It appears so, sir. The war chief was quiet for a long moment. He remembered his conversation with Minister Qi Young, how he had mocked humans for being weak prey animals. Now he was beginning to understand that he had been terribly wrong. Grexval, he said slowly, bring me everything we know about human military history. What Grexval found was disturbing. Human military records showed thousands of years of almost constant warfare. But what made it unique was how humans fought. They didn't just kill their enemies. They turned enemies against each other. They used propaganda, misinformation, and psychological warfare as much as physical weapons. They call it asymmetric warfare, Grexaval reported. When facing a stronger opponent, humans don't try to match their strength. Instead, they attack weaknesses the opponent doesn't know they have. And they use these tactics against us? Against all of us, sir. Look at this analysis. The holographic display showed a timeline of events at Helios 7th. Grexaval had mapped out every accident, equipment failure, and communication breakdown that had ended the fighting. The Vorthan internal conflict started exactly 47 minutes after the human cultural expert was seen in their sector. The Chitauri evacuation began 2 hours after rumors appeared about bioweapons that target insect nervous systems. The Nexari retreat happened immediately after their air filtration was compromised by a fire suppression system that triggered for no apparent reason. Grathax studied the timeline. The coordination is perfect. Too perfect to be coincidence. Yes, sir. 4 humans ended a 17-species war in 12 hours using nothing but manipulation and psychological warfare. The war chief felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine respect for an enemy. The humans hadn't beaten the tailor through strength or superior weapons. They had done something far more impressive. They had made the tailor beat themselves. Similar realizations were spreading throughout the galaxy's military and intelligence communities. Species that had never agreed on anything began to share a common concern. Humans were not what they appeared to be. Chancellor Vexhari of the Galactic Merchant Guild called an emergency session. Representatives from 43 species gathered via holographic conference to discuss the situation. The evidence is undeniable, Chancellor Vexhari announced. The humans at Helios 7 demonstrated capabilities that none of our intelligence services detected. What kind of capabilities? Asked Elder Zixmoth of the Ancient Codex, a species known for their wisdom and long memory. The ability to end wars without fighting them. The capacity to turn our own cultural strengths into weaknesses. Most disturbing of all, they did it while appearing completely innocent. The holographic representations of dozens of species showed signs of unease, fidgeting, shifting, the subtle body language of beings who had suddenly realized they might not understand the galaxy as well as they thought. What do you propose? Asked Queen Speaker Zixra. Chancellor Vexhari had been preparing for this moment. We need new protocols for dealing with humans. They represent a level of strategic thinking we haven't encountered before. Are you suggesting they're a threat? I'm suggesting they're the most dangerous species in the galaxy, precisely because they don't appear to be dangerous. Elder Zixmoth spoke in his ancient, measured voice. In my species' long history, we have learned that true power reveals itself not in what a being can destroy, but in what it can create and control. These humans created chaos from order, then created order from chaos, all without anyone noticing they were doing it. What's your point, Elder? Asked General Vexthor. My point is that we have been thinking about this wrong. We arm ourselves with plasma and steel because we evolved as predators. Humans evolved as survivors. When you learn to survive on a world that tries to kill you for millions of years, every tool becomes a weapon. Every conversation becomes a battle. Every friendship becomes a strategic advantage. The conference fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species in the galaxy had evolved to fill a specific niche. Warriors, traders, builders, thinkers. But humans seem to have evolved to excel at everything, using intelligence and adaptability to overcome any challenge. So what do we do? War Chief Grathax asked. How do we protect ourselves from beings who can wage war through conversation? We change the rules. Chancellor Vexhari replied. Starting immediately, humans will be classified differently in all Merchant Guild facilities. How so? They will be considered inherently weaponized. The phrase sent shockwaves through the conference. No species had ever been classified that way before. It meant that humans would be treated as walking weapons, regardless of what they carried. Is that legal? Asked Queen Speaker Zixra. We'll make it legal, the Chancellor replied. The Guild has the authority to set security protocols for all member stations and trading posts. As of today, those protocols will recognize that some weapons cannot be detected by scanners or confiscated by guards. You mean their minds. I mean their entire culture, their history, their psychology, their way of thinking about problems. Every human who enters a Guild facility represents thousands of years of evolutionary pressure to survive through intelligence and manipulation. Elder Zixmoth nodded slowly. It makes sense. If you cannot separate a being from their most dangerous weapon, then you must treat the being as the weapon. The vote was unanimous. From that day forward, humans would be allowed to enter Merchant Guild facilities without weapons checks. Not because they were harmless, but because checking them for weapons was meaningless. The most dangerous thing they carried was something that could not be confiscated, their ability to think. But there was another reason for the new rule, one that none of the species wanted to admit openly. They were afraid that if they tried to treat humans like other species, the humans might demonstrate their capabilities again, and next time, the demonstration might be directed at them. Back on Earth, Minister Qi Young received a classified report about the new regulations. He read it quietly in his office, then looked out the window at the peaceful gardens surrounding the diplomatic complex. His aide, a young woman named Hyejin, knocked on his door. Sir, the Galactic Commerce Committee is requesting a meeting about the new security protocols. Tell them we appreciate their consideration for our safety, Qi Young replied with a slight smile, and remind them that humans have always preferred diplomacy to conflict. As Hyejin left to deliver the message, the minister turned back to his report. The galaxy had learned an important lesson at Helios 7th, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. The most dangerous predator was indeed the one that looked like prey, and humans had been prey animals once, a very long time ago. They had learned to survive by becoming something else entirely, something that made weapons unnecessary. The emergency session of the Galactic Merchant Guild lasted 3 days. In conference rooms across dozens of worlds, representatives argued, debated, and finally accepted a reality that none of them had wanted to face. Humans were different. Chancellor Vexhari stood before the assembled delegates in the Guild's main chamber on Centralis Prime. The ancient building had seen many historic decisions, but none quite like this one. After careful analysis of the Helios 7 incident, the Chancellor announced, the Guild Council has reached a unanimous decision. Effective immediately, humans will be reclassified under our security protocols. The chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Tall Vorthax with their forearms crossed, insectoid Chitauri clicking nervously, crystalline Nexari that glowed with inner light. All of them waited to hear how their relationship with humanity would change. The new classification is as follows. Chancellor Vexhari continued. Humans are now considered an inherently weaponized species. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate raised a feathered wing. Chancellor, could you explain what that means in practical terms? It means that requiring humans to surrender weapons would be both meaningless and potentially dangerous. Their minds, their cultural knowledge, their capacity for strategic thinking, these are their weapons. Therefore, standard weapon confiscation procedures will not apply to human traders. War Chief Grathax of the hegemony of Talar stood up. You're saying they get special treatment because they're clever? Elder Zixmoth of the Ancient Codex spoke in his slow, ancient voice. War Chief, you misunderstand the situation. This is not special treatment. This is a recognition of reality. Explain. The Elder's crystalline form pulsed with soft light. We have all seen the analysis of Helios 7th. 4 humans ended a 17-species conflict without firing a shot, without drawing a weapon, without anyone even knowing they were involved. How do you confiscate that kind of capability? General Vexthor of the Vorthan Empire added his voice to the discussion. The Elder speaks truth. Our intelligence services have studied human military history. They have been waging psychological warfare for millennia. It is not a skill they learned recently. It is part of their nature. Queen Speaker Zixra of the Chitauri made a series of rapid clicks that her translator rendered as concern. But surely this creates an unfair advantage in trade negotiations? Chancellor Vexhari had been expecting this question. The Guild has considered this issue. However, we must balance fairness against safety. The evidence suggests that restricting humans' freedom of movement could provoke exactly the kind of demonstration we witnessed at Helios 7. The truth behind those words was darker than the Chancellor wanted to admit. Intelligence analysts from a dozen species had reached the same conclusion. Humans were most dangerous when they felt threatened or constrained. Give them freedom, and they were peaceful traders. Corner them and they became something terrifying. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The evidence from Helios 7th was too clear, and the implications too frightening. By the end of the 3rd day, the new regulations were official. Humans would be allowed unrestricted access to all Merchant Guild facilities. No weapon scans, no security searches, no mandatory escorts, not because they were harmless, but because they were the opposite. The news reached Earth through diplomatic channels within hours. President Park Sang-ho called an emergency cabinet meeting in Seoul. Thoughts? The president asked after reading the Guild announcement. Foreign Minister Lee Kyung-suk spoke first. It's both an opportunity and a burden. We'll have easier access to galactic markets, but every human trader will now be seen as a potential threat. Defense Minister Cho Byung-ho was more direct. They're afraid of us. The question is whether that makes us safer or puts us in more danger. Minister Ki Young, recently returned from Helios the 7th, had been quiet during the discussion. Now he cleared his throat. If I may offer a perspective from someone who was there. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about Junho's death, though. The full details of what happened afterward remained classified at the highest levels. The galaxy has learned something important, Ki Young continued. They've discovered that humans approach conflict differently than other species. We don't just fight, we solve. We don't just react, we adapt. Most importantly, we don't just survive, we thrive. And that frightens them? It should. Ki Young's expression was serious. Because it means that in any conflict, we don't just want to win. We want to end the possibility of future conflicts entirely. President Park nodded slowly. So how do we handle this new status? Carefully. We use the opportunities it creates. But we remember that respect based on fear is fragile. One mistake, one overstep, and we could find ourselves facing a galaxy united against us. Meanwhile, back on Kalari Prime Station, Captain Hyunwoo had finished his story. Felthara, The young Zephyrian trader sat in stunned silence as the implication sank in. So the rule exists not to protect other species from human weapons, she said slowly, but to protect them from human minds. In a way, Hyunwoo replied, but it's more complex than that. The rule exists because the guild realized that humans can't be disarmed. Our most dangerous capabilities can't be taken away at a security checkpoint. Administrator Kixtal approached their table. The old Korthian had been listening from a distance. Young Zephyrian, do you understand now? Velthara looked up at him, with wide eyes. I think so. Humans are dangerous not because of what they carry, but because of what they are. Precisely. Every other species in the galaxy evolved to fill a specific niche. We became warriors, or builders, or traders, or thinkers. Humans evolved to become survivors, and survivors learn to use everything, including their enemies, as tools for survival. So Young, the human navigator, spoke quietly. We didn't choose to be this way. Our planet made us this way. Thousands of years of wars, disasters, and challenges that would have destroyed other species. But you survived, Kixtal said. We did more than survive, we learned. And what we learned was that the deadliest weapon in any conflict is understanding your opponent better than they understand themselves. Velthara was beginning to see the full picture. That's why other aliens step aside when humans pass. It's not fear exactly. It's recognition, Jinne finished. Deep down, every species knows that humans see things differently. We notice patterns they miss. We understand weaknesses they don't know they have. And that makes you dangerous even when you're trying to be peaceful. Especially then, Hyunwoo said with a sad smile, because peaceful humans are humans who haven't been threatened yet. Administrator Kixtal pulled out a small data pad and showed it to Velthara. These are the crime statistics for Kalari Prime over the past 5 years. Notice anything interesting? Velthara studied the numbers. Violence has decreased by 40% since humans started trading here regularly. Exactly. Do you know why? The young Zephyrian thought about it. Because other species are more careful when humans are watching? Because humans prevent conflicts before they start, Kixtal explained. They see the signs that a dispute is brewing and find ways to redirect it. A word here, a suggestion there, a small favor that changes everything. They're manipulating us. They're managing us, the administrator corrected. There's a difference. Manipulation is done for personal gain. Management is done for everyone's benefit. Hyunwoo stood up from the table. We should get back to our ship. Long day tomorrow. As the human crew walked away, Velthara called out, Captain Hyunwoo, one more question. He turned back. If humans are so dangerous, why do you seem so normal? Hyunwoo smiled, and for just a moment his expression showed something deeper, something that reminded Velthara that this pleasant merchant had been shaped by a species that had weaponized everything, including kindness itself. Because, young trader, the most dangerous predator is the one that looks like everything except what it really is. As the humans disappeared into the crowds of the station, Velthara sat back in her chair. She finally understood why the security rules were different for humans. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson at Helios 7. When you evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill you, you didn't develop bigger claws or stronger armor. You developed something far more dangerous. You developed the ability to turn anything, including peace itself, into a weapon. Administrator Kixtal watched the young Zephyrian process this information. Remember this lesson, he told her. The species that learn to make weapons from everything is the same species that learn to make peace from anything. The Merchant Guild's greatest fear isn't that humans will start a war. What is their greatest fear? Velthara asked. That humans will end one on their terms. The old Korthian walked away, leaving Velthara alone with her thoughts. Around her, the station buzzed with activity. Hundreds of species trading, negotiating, building the relationships that kept galactic civilization functioning. And somewhere, among them, humans moved like shepherds through a flock, unseen and unnoticed, making sure that the complex dance of galactic commerce continued without violence. They carried no weapons because they had become something more dangerous than any weapon could ever be.